And joining me in studio now is the CEO of the Institute of Economic Affairs, Kwame Owino, to make sense of all of this. Kwame, thanks for coming in. You heard the vox pops there from Kenyans who are really frustrated with the rising cost of living, inflation at 11.48% as of April. We heard the Deputy President tweet just recently saying that the cost of living was a cause of external factors. So what brought us here?
Well, I think it's clear. Let's start with the Kenyan households. Your average Kenyan household spends almost half of all their income just buying food.
Wow.
So if the price of food has risen, whether it's by external or internal factors, obviously it's a shock. And you also mentioned about inflation. Yes. So between April last year and April this year, if you went for 1,000 shillings of shopping last year, for the things you'd buy for 1,000, today you'd be getting, for the things you'd buy for 1,000, today you'd get the equivalent of 880, which means our buying power has reduced. Whatever the cost may be, and I disagree completely with trying to externalize this issue. The big problem is, yes, we knew a drought was coming. We've always had droughts coming in ever tighter cycles. And at the same time, government made the wrong policy choices. One, we brought seed which failed, fertilizer which did not work. And so obviously what we did was feed the big farmers as usual. So perhaps he was speaking for those farmers. He might even be one of them himself, which is fine. But the truth is, in the end, the Kenyan, with their income, which has been stagnant for a while, goes to the shops and they find out that they buy much, much less. And because food is what takes up most of their money, if food becomes expensive, it immediately pinches.
So you don't buy the whole thing of external factors contributing to this at all?
Well, in domestic politics, I think, and especially in our country over the last 4 years, it's very easy to actually point to some external factors. I don't know who this is. It's a factor we've done for 40 years. And perhaps we should retire that game and start to be honest with ourselves. Why are Kenyans starving when 70% of Kenyans call themselves farmers? So that's the discussion we should have. I don't think there's any such thing as, we cannot externalize this problem. Because when a Kenyan starves, he starves, irrespective of where the cause, what the cause is.
And in terms of contributing factors, how much of this could be an issue of how consumers have contributed to it?
Well, I guess that's true. So we've been talking here about flour and maize, grain. But there are other parts. For instance, just before, as you asked me to prepare for this, I've realized that among countries with sugar companies, or rather countries that grow sugar, and I think there are about 40 or so in the world, about 41 or thereabouts from the quick research that I did. Kenya has the most expensive sugar in the world.
Wow. Kenyan
sugar today is more expensive than what you buy in Germany, if you just convert by that. Why? Because we don't want to retire dinosaurs such as Mumias and Sony sugar. So their political constituency, some of which Kenyans, as consumers, we support, and then when that sugar becomes expensive, we then blame government. So part of it is also us. We have to make brave decisions and decide whether we want cheap sugar or we want sugar that is, we want sugarcane companies that are run to give jobs to some people. And how much of that
sugar pricing crisis is as a result of hoarding, for instance, to create artificial shortages, if you will?
I don't think it's that. It's not hoarding. If Kenyans are prepared to pay 160, why would you hoard? You actually would make that money very, very quickly without having to hoard. I don't think so. I actually think part of it is just because we have inefficient sugar companies, which are not run for farmers' sake, but are run for the purposes of the people who run them, some of those CEOs who eventually become governors. So that's the first part. And then the second part is that we have brokers. A license to import sugar is a very lucrative thing in Kenya, which again are managed by the same sugar companies that have failed to give us that sugar, and then plus other people, many of them who are politically connected or part of the sugar politics.
So let's talk solutions now. The president made a commitment that they would deal with this cost of living. I said that a supplementary budget will be introduced to Parliament this week. Will that work?
Wow. I do not think, remember just about 3 weeks ago, we had the budget statement presented before Parliament. Never in Kenya's life have we ever had a supplementary budget coming in 3 weeks after the last budget was discussed. But anyway, that's. And 3 weeks ago, because the National Bureau of Statistics monitors prices every month. So 6 months ago, it was clear that prices of food were already going up. Why wasn't it a budget issue? So it looks like we're dealing with it because 3 months from now, we'll probably be having an election and it might toss up election politics. So that's the first thing. The sincerity about that is questionable. I don't know how. These are laws of demand and supply working. I don't know how you can legislate against the laws of supply to make sure that those prices really go down. What I think we'll do, which is what we've done all over in Kenya's life is we throw money at it. So we're going to tax Kenyans again after failing to manage sugar and grain politics properly.
Right.
And then we're going to try and, quote unquote, provide some kind of subsidy to make that unga cheaper. Of course, we remember in 2009 and 2010, we tried a similar thing and it didn't work.
Right.
This is a structural
ile ya unga. Tafadhali kabisa punguzia hawa ikuje chini. Hata ukiambia sisi railway itafika Nairobi next year ndio unga iende chini, they will accept.
You're an economist.
Yeah.
Is it that easy? Move money from a development project into dealing with the crisis?
Well, development is about people. So if people can't even afford basic food, which they themselves have spoken about, and which the president talked about yesterday. So we are convinced it's a big problem, and it's not a problem we've dealt with just this time. To be honest, it's not a creation of Jubilee government, I mean, whatever. Though, of course, their solutions have woefully failed. But yes, that's a priority. The state exists for the welfare of Kenyans. So there's no reason for us to insist on a toughness that we must complete a railway line for the purposes of prestige when Kenyans are dying. If people can't afford meals, and of course there are surveys that have shown that some Kenyans, something like 20–30% of Kenyans over the last 1 year sometimes forgo meals for the purposes of just making sure that, I mean, the money isn't there. So yes, it shows where our priorities are. Our priorities are, we are building dams, we are, rather, not even dams actually, we are building power stations, we are building roads to nowhere, and we are building a railway train that is overstated, I mean, whose price is overdone, but at the same time, Kenyans can't do basic things. And what it reminds me is, coming to your view about solutions, is let's not try and do the spectacular things if Kenyans are starving. The very basis is, let's go to the basics. And the basics is this, in my view. We must have a policy in Kenya that privileges cheap food as opposed to rich farmers. Because the farmers who actually export and have huge sums of, huge stores of maize, and the millers are the ones who make a lot of money. And government gives them price support by saying, look, in the market, the price of maize would be 2,200, but they are paid 3,000, sometimes as much as that. So we have to make that choice.
Now, in terms of timelines, because we heard the NASA candidates saying that within 90 days of us being voted in, will bring down the cost of living. How practical is that, or when are we likely to see at least some easing?
Well, you know, this is not a problem. To be honest, this a problem about commodities and is not a political thing. These NASA people are also claiming that they'll be controlling prices. And price controls haven't worked. I mean, we've done them for 50 years since independence. Price controls have not worked as a way of making sure that people get the best. But I think one of the things you have to do is perhaps now to call government and say, on whose side do you stand? Because if we want farmers we can't want maize to be expensive and flour to be cheap. I think we have to decide which side to come on. And I think a prudent government, given our circumstances, should have to come on the side of households. So that's one. So 90 days, I don't think in 90 days, well, maybe 90 days we can have a new harvest, but I don't know that the rains have been here. The meteorological department says that for 60% of the country, the rains were suboptimal. So it's not going to be that easy to solve. I think NASA has to be real as well.
Okay, thank you for your time, Kwame.